Good evening and welcome to the Kuhn Academy for our final 2014 installment of AP US History, where we're not just learning history, we're making history. All right, today we're actually going to live history a little bit here. All right, so it's not too often a teacher gets to teach something as a current event and then also get to teach it as history. All right, so we're looking at the decade of the 90s, all right, 1989 to 2000. Foner calls it globalization and its discontents. Okay, we hopefully know globalization is this idea that we're going to spread our economy around the world. All right, that we are globally connected um, with all other nations. We have more free trade than ever, which means less tariffs. We are buying more products, more imports that way, okay, opening up new markets and things like that. And then we definitely see some discontents at home, a lot of tension, which will kind of close out the decade. All right. Things begin in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which we've talked about in class as the symbolic end of communism, because this had forever divided the city of East and West Berlin, which kind of symbolized communism versus capitalism. So when this comes down in November of 1989, we start to see kind of a new world order with no communism, or very little communism. So creates a little bit of a crisis, as Foner says here, because now we have all these countries transitioning from communism, okay, to capitalism, right? So what that means is these countries that have traditionally not been part of the global economy now have to be part of it. So we have to transition into this, and Russia's kind of started experimenting with these two programs called Glasnost and Perestroika, which kind of led this openness and open markets and things, which was going to lead to the fall of communism. All right, so it's kind of a transition. Big name that comes up with that is a guy named Boris Yeltsin. He is the Russian premier that's going to take over from Mikhail Gorbachev, who you hopefully heard about in our last video. All right, so we have kind of a new world order. All right, what we have left is we have the U.S. as the world's only superpower. All right, Russia has fallen; they've had their own internal strife, so pretty much America is the world superpower. All right, so sort of to test that in 1990/91 is the Persian Gulf War, which is where Saddam Hussein in Iraq, as you know, invades a little island, or not a little island, a little small country called Kuwait. All right, don't have it on a map here to show you, but Kuwait is a little small country that kind of makes Iraq landlocked and prevents Iraq from having access to the Persian Gulf. So Saddam Hussein is going to invade Kuwait with the intent of taking it over, all right, via annexation, and expand his oil. All right, so America sends troops, all right, as part of something called Desert Shield, which was a plan to protect the Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia from a potential Saddam invasion, because Saddam did want to eventually take over Saudi Arabia, which would give him 25% of the world's oil supply. All right. Well, Desert Shield lasts for the remaining years of 1990, and then President George W. Bush, or H.W. Bush, puts together a coalition of countries around the world and transitions from Desert Shield into Desert Storm. All right, where we are going to invade in January of 1991 Kuwait with the hope of ousting Saddam Hussein, and that is extremely successful, and kind of Bush is kind of riding high, and America's riding high as the world superpower, and we've brought some stability and peace to the Middle East. All right, so that's Operation Desert Storm. Okay, here you can kind of see George H.W. Bush here meeting with some guys you might know, Dick Cheney, all right, who was his Secretary of Defense at the time, and Colin Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who led that military invasion of Kuwait. All right, and Norman Schwarzkopf was the actual general on the ground that got us into Desert Storm. All right. So after the Cold War, here's kind of what America starts to take, or here's what the world starts to look like a little bit. No longer do we have the USSR. The Soviet Union has fallen, okay, and these Baltic republics now have their independence. Belarus, Ukraine, all right, all these countries here, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, are now their own countries. So we have, I think, 15 or 16 new countries in the world, and Russia now is still a large country, but it's no longer the Soviet Union. It is just one of the states that was part of that. Okay, and then all these Eastern European countries here, which have been part of the Soviet bloc, are now going to be independent also. All right. So in 1992, We have a presidential election, all right? And what's interesting in this one is you have Clinton running as the Democrat, okay, who's governor of Arkansas. Bush is the Republican, all right? Basically looking to be the fourth Republican president in a row, or fourth term. We had Reagan for 2 terms, all right? Reagan goes from 81 to 89, and then Bush had 89 to 93. And if he won again, that'd be 4 consecutive terms of Republicans. We have not seen that since the McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt era. So actually, McKinley Roosevelt era would be the last time we had 4 consecutive Republicans winning elections. So this would be a big change. So odds are stacked against Bush, even though he's the favorite because he does have Desert Storm. He's still riding Reagan's popularity. And a candidate enters the field by the name of Ross Perot as an independent candidate, and his biggest issue is the budget. He is he's complaining that we are $3 trillion in debt, and this debt is unsustainable, and we cannot continue, and if we don't do anything about the debt, we might have a $17 trillion debt by 2014, and imagine what the country's going to look like then. You know what that's going to look like then, right? So Clinton wins the election. It's a 3-way vote. Perot gets no electoral votes because he does not have a strong enough showing in any of the states. But if you look on the map here, he does get 19% of the popular vote, which makes Bill Clinton a minority candidate. 57% of the country voted against him, but not enough for any other candidate to beat him. All right, and we start to see a little chink in the Southern strategy here. Okay, we know the South had been going Republican because of Nixon, but Al Gore was picked as his VP from Tennessee. Clinton was from Arkansas. So you start to see some southern states going Democratic. A little bit of chink in the southern strategy there. All right. So Clinton comes into office, tries to tackle a couple things. He wants to try and put universal health insurance on the table as a big issue for the Democrats, and gays in the military. All right, those were his first 2 priorities as he came into office, to try and make some social improvements. All right, and some economic improvements as well. Okay, we're also going to push for tax increases on the wealthy. Ronald Reagan, as you hopefully saw in the last video, cut taxes dramatically. Clinton wants to restore those back to what he considered more fairer levels, mostly on the wealthy was what Clinton was pushing for. Okay, and Clinton has a disastrous first 2 years in office. All right, he does the gays in the military thing, but it leads to a policy called "Don't Ask, Don't Tell." That was repealed a few years ago by President Obama and the Democrats. The way this would work is you can be in the military. The government just can't ask you if you're gay, and you can't tell them that you're gay. If they do, they would kick you out. And health insurance goes nowhere. It doesn't pass. So Clinton has some bad policies on his hands, which leads to a revolution in 1992 or 94. One of the things Clinton also signs when he comes in office is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is going to break down the tariff barriers between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. So what you see in this cartoon here is, since there are no tariffs, why would you have a U.S. factory when you can go to Mexico and get the cheaper labor and less environmental standards down there, and then still sell your stuff in the United States with no tariffs? Okay, so you see the workers leaving Mexico to come to the United States, but America leaving, the factories leaving America to go to Mexico. All right. To wrap up this segment of the video, we're going to talk about the 1994 revolution for the Republicans. Okay, this is called the Contract for America, or with America. You see it in the picture there. I don't know why I'm writing it here. Okay, the leader of this is a guy by the name of Newt Gingrich from Georgia. All right, and Newt Gingrich is basically promising to restore the government to a simpler time. Okay, it actually, the Contract for America looks a lot like the Confederate Constitution. Okay, we don't have time to get into why, but they've called for things like term limits, a line item veto, so a president could cut spending from bills and stuff like that, and it allows the Republican Party to take the majority in the House and Senate for the first time. All right, and their biggest commitment, not first time since 1948, I believe. Okay, so it's a huge swing for the Republicans. All right, so they take over the House and the Senate, and they're pushing an issue of limited government. All right, we're going to stop there just to give you a little bit of a break. All right, so thanks for listening to Kuhn Academy, where we're not just learning history, we're making history.